A man sends an email with 3 words that would define his legacy. He climbs into the pilot seat of his private jet. He is content knowing that business is good. But his decisions will have consequences. Miles away, a small boy screams for help. A daughter holds her mother's hand as her once strong grip starts to slip away. A woman's fight against cancer turns even deadlier. The crunch of a beloved snack becomes a death sentence. What if I told you the man in the jet knew this could happen? He just didn't care. His peanut processing company is going to make $25 million for the year, but it's not enough. He wants every peanut, all 1.8 million tons produced in the US in 2007, to be produced at his factories. Tainted or not, his product will be sold to men, women, and children all over the country. It will be in over 2,100 products across 17 categories in more than 200 well-known brands. This is the sick and twisted story of the CEO who knew he was shipping death to millions of people and did it anyway. Peanut butter was originally marketed as a protein substitute for people who couldn't chew solid food. It was invented in 1895 by Dr. John Kellogg, who also created Kellogg's cereal. Today, you'll find it in 94% of all American homes. Big brands like Jif aren't growing their own peanuts, they buy them from other businesses. A company like the Peanut Corporation of America would meet that demand. The peanut butter market is going to grow by about $1.1 billion between 2023 and 2028, and the PCA should have been around to capitalize on that. It would have been a great success story. A tiny family business in the 90s became a multi-million-dollar enterprise in the early 2000s, and finally, a market leader in the 2020s. But that last bit never happened. Instead, the Peanut Corporation of America lives in infamy.
In Blakely, Georgia, this peanut processing plant is now a crime scene in what investigators suspect was a preventable threat spreading through America's food chain.
It's an example of how quickly people lose their humanity in a mindless pursuit of profit. Its early growth was built on blind greed. The PCA was responsible for a vicious salmonella outbreak that spread countrywide.
In mid-September last year, on the U.S.-Canadian border, a shipment of chopped peanuts from PCA, described as filthy, putrid, decomposing, unfit for food, and later shown to include metal fragments, was sent to Canada, which rejected it.
Innocent victims believed they were buying healthy, safe food, but took home a petri dish of disease. Years later, these families haven't moved on from the pain it caused. If what happened to them happened to you, you wouldn't either. Jeff Almer saw his mother Shirley go through hell for nearly a year and couldn't do a thing to stop it. In her early 70s, Shirley's life was turned upside down in July 2008. She suffered multiple seizures, and tests revealed a cancerous brain tumor. Jeff always knew his mother was a fighter, so he was proud but not surprised when she confronted her cancer head-on. But neither of them knew how much harder that fight was going to get just a few months later. Not because of her cancer, because of one man who traded her health for a bigger profit. By December 2008, the illness had taken its toll on Shirley, but it's safe to say she was in good spirits. The Brainerd nursing home she lived in was decorated for the holidays. It also meant she would get more time with her family, including her 5 children. But this was not going to be a very Merry Christmas for the Almers. A week before the holiday, Shirley was hospitalized with severe dehydration. She probably chalked it up to her cancer treatments. It was usually first up on the list of side effects. It was a bump along the way, not a roadblock. Doctors told Shirley she'd be discharged on the 22nd. Unfortunately, she never got to see the outside of the hospital room. She passed away on December 21st. Doctors assumed it was pneumonia, probably because they didn't have any reason to suspect anything else. Jeff and his siblings were devastated. Christmas came and went without the unconditional love, support, and warmth of their mother. Her funeral was packed with people who shared stories of how Shirley changed their lives in her own little way. But 2 weeks later, their pain was replaced by confusion. The Minnesota Department of Health called the siblings with new information. She had salmonella bacteria in her blood. The mother of 5 didn't just spend her last days fighting cancer, she'd gone up against a deadly bacterial infection too. Salmonella's nastier symptoms cause loads of fluid loss. Combine that with the dehydration she probably already had from her cancer treatments, and you're on a road that ends in sadness. But how did Shirley get salmonella? Who was responsible? Jeff got answers to those questions pretty quickly, but it took time for him to realize the truth. Her death was a small piece of a huge, terrifying pattern, but justice would have to wait. This outbreak wasn't confined to the nursing home, it was coming for people far healthier than Shirley was. But did better health guarantee survival? Earlene Borden wished that it did when her mother Minnie fell seriously sick in the fall of 2008. Raised in Lanett, Alabama, Minnie Borden's most extraordinary quality was her love for life. It was second only to her love for Little Debbie's peanut butter cheese sandwich crackers. A little hearing trouble and arthritis didn't slow Minnie down. She was perfectly active, but then something changed in 2008. It was the start of a grueling, nasty battle with salmonella that pushed Minnie and Earlene to their limits. It started off small. Minnie would get the occasional stomachache, and her appetite slowly started to go away. Regardless of how hungry she was or wasn't, Minnie didn't stop eating her Little Debbie crackers. As her symptoms got worse, she didn't pause to consider what was making her sick. By December, her pain was unbearable. This was not normal. Minnie called Earlene, who immediately rushed her mother to the Miami Valley Hospital emergency room. The pain had spread to her chest, so the doctor's immediate concern was a heart attack. But blood tests and EKG and lots of observation later, they didn't have much to go on. At this point, Earlene decided to take matters into her own hands. Minnie moved in with her daughter, and the next week was horrible. Earlene watched as her mother became weaker and weaker. This phantom sickness was taking Minnie apart. Another trip to the doctor and more testing still didn't give the Bordens an answer. But that changed on Christmas Eve. 3 days after Shirley Ulmer passed away in Minnesota, one of Minnie's doctors sent a sample to test for pathogens. The result was alarming, but it gave the doctors and the Bordens an answer. Minnie had salmonella. They finally had a diagnosis, but one question hung over the family's heads. Was it too late? Her decline had been shocking to see. Even though she had arthritis before getting sick, no one could slow down Minnie with her trusty cane. She was independent, energetic, and an unstoppable force of nature. But in a few weeks, salmonella had taken all of that away. Minnie could barely walk. Earlene would usually have to help her out of bed. When she was discharged on December 29th, doctors strongly recommended that Earlene place her mother in a skilled nursing facility. They knew that it was a serious situation and she needed constant supervision. But Minnie's daughter wasn't going to leave her alone with a bunch of strangers. So Earlene hired a nurse, put her life on hold, and became her mother's full-time caretaker. That's better care than most of the other victims of this outbreak were offered. She would help her mother out of bed in the morning, go to the bathroom, and even feed her if necessary. If Minnie ate some oatmeal and applesauce, it was a good day. If she willingly got out of bed in the morning, it was a great one. Then came January 15th, 2009. When the nurse reached the Borden's house, she saw that her patient's fingernails were turning blue. The first sign her blood oxygen levels were plummeting. She was rushed to emergency care where Earlene didn't leave her side, brushing Minnie's hair, holding her hand, and giving her sips of water. That's all she could do for her mother. 4 days later, on January 19th, Earlene kissed her mom on the forehead and went back home for the night. But a couple of hours later, she found herself back in the hospital. Doctors had called and said Minnie had taken a turn for the worse. Her heart had given out, but they'd managed to stabilize her. Minnie was still fighting, but the battle was lost. Earlene called her family down to the hospital. On January 20th at 6:41 a.m., Minnie passed away surrounded by loved ones. Shirley Almer and Minnie Borden. Two vital, strong, loving mothers gone. Taken by a salmonella infection that snuck up on them and destroyed their lives like they were nothing. The Peanut Corporation of America was responsible, but how? What did they do? Was it an entire company infected with greed? Or was it absolute power that corrupted absolutely? In the early 2000s, the Peanut Corporation of America was basically everywhere. They didn't supply to many bigwigs, but their product went to schools, hospitals, care facilities, a few major retailers, and several other industries. But the company's CEO was obsessed with growing the company and ramping up profits. Did that make him blind to what the PCA was turning into, or was he remaking it in his image? There's been a lot of debate about this tragedy. No one argues how terrible it was, but people have rightly questioned if this was just corporate failure or an industry-wide collapse in regulation. Like so many of our other videos, the signs of trouble were always there. Nestle turned down PCA as a peanut supplier because they failed to meet company standards, but no alarm bells went off anywhere. The most basic investigations after the outbreak revealed disgusting working conditions. Here's the thing though, companies slip up every single day, but you rarely see any outbreaks that hit 46 states and infected over 700 people. That's for a simple reason. Organizations and regulators step in before that slip-up can turn into a catastrophe. That didn't happen at the Peanut Corporation of America. I've told you about Shirley and Minnie so far. You might be thinking, they were older and had other health issues, so the salmonella probably hit them harder than it would a healthy person. But Christopher Mounier was a child when he fell sick. The bacteria didn't care how young he was, and his parents' hearts broke when they saw what it did to him. Born in South Burlington, Vermont, Christopher was a happy, healthy young boy. Like so many other 7-year-olds, he believed he was invincible. The innocence of childhood protected him. In 2008, that protection failed. According to his parents, he hadn't been sick for so much as an evening since he was a toddler. But on November 25th, the Mounier household became a living nightmare. That night, and the months that followed, changed the little boy and his family forever. Chris's parents, Gabrielle and Daryl, will never forget the way their son screamed. They found him sprawled on the floor, confused and in extreme pain. He couldn't understand why his body was doing this to him. It was the first time her son had understood his own mortality. Gabrielle and Daryl couldn't help him at home, so they rushed their son to the Fletcher Allen Healthcare emergency room. Tests revealed that the young boy had E. coli O157H7, Salmonella, and Shigella. That strain of E. coli produces a toxin that destroys the lining of the intestines and causes bleeding. Shigella screws with the stomach even more and causes high fevers. Combine all of that with everything I've already told you about Salmonella. That's what 7-year-old Christopher Mounier was going through. He was hospitalized for 6 days. He had a fever, was dehydrated, rapidly losing weight, and going to the bathroom over a dozen times a day. Chris had even tested positive for Clostridium difficile, a bacteria that infects the colon. It can be life-threatening if it's not treated correctly. Despite this, his doctors were positive that the worst of his pain and suffering was because of salmonella. Chris was discharged on December 3rd, but he was far from cured. The 7-year-old was prescribed a mountain of antibiotics and had to stay on a liquid diet. All the Mouniers could do was wait and hope the medicines would do their job. Every night, his parents were scared they would hear that piercing scream again. Then finally, in May 2009, nearly 6 months after he fell sick, Chris made a full recovery. But he wasn't the same. Memories of his illness weren't going to go away, and the fear of salmonella continues to hang over the Mounier family's heads. Through all of this, they never stopped to consider how Chris had gotten sick. Was it just bad luck? You and I know it wasn't. The 7-year-old had been victimized by the Peanut Corporation of America. Well, it's actually a little more specific than that. Earlier, I told you that one man's responsible for this tragedy. It's the same man with his private jet. He is proof of the evil born from greed in the American food industry. I'm going to show you what he did, and you'll pray the way I did that people like Shirley Ulmer, Minnie Borden, and Chris Mounier and their families found justice. In 2007, the PCA made about $25 million in revenue and accounted for about 2.5% of all the processed peanuts in the United States. Its CEO, Stuart Parnell, had spearheaded this growth. After his family sold the business and cashed out, he refused to let someone else control what they had built. In 2000, he bought back the company, partnered with a struggling peanut plant in Blakely, Georgia, and tripled revenue in 3 years. But it wasn't his operational excellence as a businessman that drove these numbers. Parnell was a snake. He is the great evil at the center of this tragedy. His greed and foul behavior wasn't hidden in the shadows. Stuart created this outbreak. You might even say he shipped a fresh batch of salmonella right to your doorstep. In January 2009, the Food and Drug Administration traced the outbreak to the PCA. It had infected over 430 products across the country. The official numbers confirmed 714 cases and 9 deaths, but the Center for Disease Control estimated about 22,000 salmonella victims. At this point, authorities didn't know how bad things really were in the PCA, but they quickly discovered that Stuart had been playing with fire for years before the outbreak. It's standard practice for companies like the PCA to test their product before shipping it to customers. But between September 2004 and 2006, Stuart did the unthinkable. On 8 separate occasions, he ordered that the product be shipped before the microbial testing results came in. This meant that companies received PCA peanuts without confirming that they were salmonella-free. Here's the gap in regulation. At that time, PCA had to test and report any exposure to bacteria before the product was shipped, but there didn't seem to be any third party enforcing this rule. That meant Stuart Parnell could lie as much as he wanted without anyone knowing. This included not informing customers if products were contaminated when test results finally came in. Any action that was taken would only happen after the fact. That's exactly what happened here. When investigators searched through company emails, they didn't just discover half-truths like shipping without waiting for results. Stuart was straight up lying to customers. In October 2006, a customer told him that his product had tested positive for salmonella. Here's what Stuart had to say. "I am dumbfounded by what you have found. It is the first time in my over 26 years in the business that I have ever seen any instance of this. We run certificates of analysis every day with tests for salmonella and have not found any instances of any, even traces of a salmonella problem." Fun fact, the PCA had tested that batch, knew it had salmonella, and shipped it anyway, under orders from CEO Stuart Parnell. About a month after that email, his brother, Michael Parnell, got his hands dirty. He's the vice president of PP Sales, the food broker that handles PCA's business. He emailed his sibling saying that they could create a fake certificate of analysis if needed. Investigators discovered countless emails like this, including one with 3 infamous words that defined his trial and Stuart Parnell's actions: "Just ship it." To sum up, Stuart Parnell shipped millions worth of product without waiting for test results, lied to customers if they did find salmonella, and then started faking certifications to keep his business going. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but somehow it's even worse than that. Here's what he did. Stuart would take lot number 1 of peanuts and test it. If it was clean, he would test that same lot 4 more times. He would use those results to say that lots number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 were clean without actually testing them. These emails had been exposed by the time this case went to trial in 2014. Investigations also revealed the state of PCA factories. They found stagnant water, roaches, and evidence of rodents, all which can cause salmonella. There was also mold and holes in ceilings that would let rainwater contaminate the product in their Blakely site. It's standard practice that if a product tests positive for salmonella, it's immediately discarded. But that was money wasted for the CEO of the PCA. He would have exposed batches retested until they turned up a negative result. He even sent out an email talking about all the money he was losing while they retested the peanuts to ensure they were safe. For years, Stuart Parnell knew that his actions would get people sick, but he didn't care. His brother helped him cover up their lies, and Mary Wilkerson, who was a quality control manager in Blakely, let it all happen. Shirley and Minnie didn't die from salmonella. It's more accurate to say they were murdered by Parnell. Christopher just about survived, but Stuart gave that child scars he will carry for a lifetime. A slap on the wrist in court was not enough, but would the system give these victims and their families the justice they deserved? Millions of dollars worth of food items were recalled. In a bitter twist of irony, the PCA was one of Kellogg's biggest suppliers. They lost about $65 to $70 million when it all went down. One creation by Dr. John Kellogg wounded the other. All in all, about $143 million worth of food, ranging from peanut-flavored crackers to airline meals, were recalled. Before he was sentenced, Parnell apologized to everyone who'd been affected by the outbreak, but he didn't get much sympathy. Jeff Almer, Shirley's son, said, "My mother died a painful death from salmonella, and the look of horror on her face as she died shall always haunt me. I just hope they ship you all to jail." Another man named Ernest said the apology was too little too late. His grandmother had passed away in the outbreak. She'd been infected by her favorite Little Debbie's peanut butter cheese sandwich crackers. Her name was Minnie Borden. And here's the bit you've been waiting for. Stuart Parnell was sentenced to 28 years in prison at the age of 61. His brother Michael went away for 20 years, and Mary Wilkerson got 5 years for obstruction of justice. Stuart's sentencing was the harshest penalty for a producer in a foodborne illness case in U.S. history. Justice was served, but it didn't bring back Jeff's mother or Ernest's grandma. It didn't give Christopher his childhood back. This was a completely avoidable tragedy, but it became inevitable because of one man's greed. As scary as they are, outbreaks will happen in the food industry. Most of them don't even make the news, but some are so horrific they won't be forgotten by anyone in a hurry.